Hey everyone, we're going to look at how to do and talk about the notes for function notation. So you see a lot of function notation on the regions, and one of the aspects of the function notation has to deal with substitution. So we're going to look at the top examples for A, B, and C on exercise 1. I got the calculator up because you're going to need the calculator for some of the calculations. So the first thing, they give you a function rule, and the reason why they do this is they're just dealing with the name. So the first rule is f, and basically the idea behind this rule is you're taking a value of x, you're multiplying by 3, 8, and 7. So for like this first one, what you're going to do is you're going to replace the x with the number 2. And you want to do that, usually you want to use parentheses for that. So what I would do right now is I would just type in that expression, 3 parentheses 2 plus 7, and then hit enter, and then the answer you get for this one's going to be 13. So if you put in the number 2, the answer you'd get out for this function would be 13, and then that would also be represented in the table. Now for the next one, g of 20, well, they want you to use this rule. The rule that says g of x. So what you're going to have is you're going to have parentheses 20 minus 6 divided by 2. And you got to be careful with parentheses and when you're doing fractions. You want to make sure you want to do each side separately. So I'm just going to put this in as I wrote it. I'm going to hold off on the divided by 2 part because I want to get one answer for each side of the fraction. So I get 14 for the top over 2, and then if you divide that, you're going to end up getting 7 for the answer. So with fractions, you want to do each side separately. Make a little note of that on your paper. And then for C, the last one, they have the square root sign. So to use that, we're going to hit the second key, and then we're going to hit the x squared button. So down here, you'll see in blue the square root symbol. So we got the square root of 2 parentheses 4 plus 1. And you want to make sure, like how I'm writing it now, everything that's under the square root sign is under the square root sign in the calculator. So that would be for the first part of C, and then that would end up being 3. So you get 3 for the answer for that. So take a minute right now and try those next ones. You can always pause the video. Now I'm going to move on to the next example. So when you're looking at A, they want to know what the rule is. So pretty much what you want to do is describe which operations you see. So do you see adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing in this? And then for part B is more of what we just talked about above. I want you to put 6 and negative 9 in for x. And C is a little different because C says, oh, f of x equals 13. Now if you see that, they don't want you to put in 13 for x. They're saying that the answer you get out is 13. So what you'd have to do is you write down the function as an equation, set an equal into that answer of 13. So you want to figure out which value of x. And the easiest way to do this would be to start by multiplying everything by 3. So I'm distributing, which you might remember from algebra. So that would end me up with 3 times 1/3, which would be 1x. 3 times 7 is 21. And then 3 times 13 is 39. And then you just want to get x by itself by subtracting the 21s on both sides. Now for right now, we're going to hold off on part D so you can cross that part out on your notes. So then try exercise 2, and then if you have any questions, please raise your hand in class, or if you're at home, ask me the next day. Now we're going to move on to the back page of this, and you're going to see some different representations. So we have a table, talks about boiling water. So we got the temperature of boiling water in a room that happens to be 65 degrees. And pretty much what you're looking for is you're going to use the table of values. They want you to evaluate T of 2, which that means in this case, in our expression, T of 2 would be looking to find the answer when you put in 2 hours. You go to 2 hours. So if I put in 2 hours, which would be the x value, then I would get out 104 for the temperature. Okay. So depending on what the answer is, or what the input is or output, that's what you were trying to look for. And then when it says for part C, what 2 consecutive hours? Well, I don't see 100 on the table for a temperature, so you want to use the table to figure out which 2 whole hours it would be between. So that should be helpful enough with exercise 3 at the top. Now exercise 4, which is below, that question deals with a graph. And again, like I talked about earlier, the number you put in is x, and the number you get out is y. So if you're trying to evaluate f of 1, what you would want to do is go along the x-axis, and you want to go along to where 1 is, which would be right here. So if you put in 1 into the function, the answer is going to be any point that hits that x line. So in this case, if I count up 1, 2, 3, 4 right here, my answer is going to be 4, because that's going to represent a point, 1, 4, which is a point that would be on that graph. Now, kind of opposite that, they're asking about, in this case, the y value. When does y equal 0? So you would want to go along, in this case, the y equals 0 line, which would be this line right here. So we're looking for any point that has 0 as an answer. So one example, that would be this point, the point -1, 0. So if x is -1, then we'd have a point -1, 0, which would be on that graph. So here's one point where we'd get 0 out for an answer. So you can see there are 2 other points. You can count those and add those to the answer as well. And then kind of the same thing for this one, the second one here. So if you have questions, please raise your hand in class. I do want you to work on the next page, and you'll see some of the same examples that we just talked about. And then make sure you work on all those questions and have me check it at the end of class.